Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the ramblings of the Reverend. So, I was kind of on a hiatus the last couple months because I had a trip and then another trip and then took a day off, all that jazz. So, it goes down to my apologies. I do have a live Facebook Live, no, a YouTube Live that I did a little bit before this last week or a couple weeks ago. Um, Talking about a previous time that I was in California because my family took a trip out to California. It was a really fun time. It was a week and a half. Really fun time, except for the whole aspect of it was ridiculous doing a red eye. Pretty much no one got sleep. We were wrecked, and it was straight into VBS. But anyhow, we're doing okay. I'm going to talk about a few things, a little bit of an update on random stuff. Well, first off, I got a haircut for those who watched the video. Evidently, the kids in the youth group say I look 28. So, I think it's because all the gray hair that you athletes in Astoria gave me, whenever that got shaved down, people couldn't see it. But, the last few weeks, pretty big stuff. This was the first week back at school for the girls. I wrote a blog post about how to make school better for kids. I really want kids to enjoy learning and enjoy different things. I'm going to be coaching elementary cross country with my wife. She's going to be Britt's going to be coaching at one of the younger elementary, and I'll be coaching at the intermediate elementary. Though, so that'll be a lot of fun. But I'm going to talk about a recent baseball game that I went to. Going to talk about just some of the other media that I've been putting out. Then I'm going to talk about books. Because this is kind of hitting pretty home a lot, and a lot of it goes to the Toy Story 5 movie that we watched for my daughter's birthday. So this has right here a lot of different pictures. We went to a Cosmic Baseball game, and Cosmic Baseball is the same level or type of baseball as the Savannah Bananas. In fact, there are some players that play in both leagues. It is if the Blue Man Group and WWE were to write a story about baseball. And so the goal and objective is to be as entertained as possible. I didn't include all my pictures from the night. The picture on the right side of the screen is they were going to launch a cow into the moon, and so they were stacking these boxes, just a ridiculously high number of boxes. And you'll see the top left picture. Eventually, it fell, and I think they stacked probably 15 times more boxes than I could do without getting it to fall. Super, super impressed how they did this like jousting on unicycles and then popped giant balloons on their heads. But once it got dark enough, you will see there's this picture of my two oldest daughters and I, and we're just glowing. It became a black light situation where, that puts out UV rays. I'm pretty sure that's how black lights work, and we're just glowing. And I thought it was incredibly entertaining. I'm super, super grateful. One of our friends had extra tickets and asked a large group of people, "Hey, who wants to go?" And so this was an awesome event that we were able to attend, even though it was raining at first, and it got canceled. Well, it got ended early because of the amount of rain. But I watched the game, and just the kind of brain that I have, I kept thinking, this isn't baseball. This is entertainment. Because there was multiple innings at the end where the kids didn't even realize that baseball was going on in the background. So on the field, it's going on, but you had people dancing and juggling on the dugouts. You had different crazy little deals. Every inning ended with a home run derby, and like those extra home runs are added to it. And there's a 45-second home run derby where they got 22 to 24 hits in. It was just ridiculous. So it may be, someone pointed out baseball is incredibly boring if you got to do all this to make people entertained. But it's a really neat idea. Just get kids involved in fun activities like this. My oldest got, I think, 6 autographs on a ball that we eventually caught at the end. Also, too, something that just breaks my heart and I don't comprehend is at sporting events, people will pay $8 to $12 for a soda, and they'll get it in a souvenir cup. and there were dozens of these souvenir cups left behind after the game where I'm like, why would you pay so much money to get this cup and leave it? Maybe they've already done it at previous games, but yeah, it's a frustrating situation. But anyhow, it made me think about how we want to entertain ourselves to death, where we don't want to actually think about our feelings, our emotions in the current moment in time. So this is where athletes who've been on your long runs with me or talked about life after practices, we we have to be able to know what we're feeling, and if we are unable to pause and think, what am I feeling? What am I actually doing? What's going on? We might feel entertained. We might feel better in that moment, but we're missing out on a bigger picture item. And so I'm 100% think Cosmic Baseball is a fun event for kids. I'd say 12 and under. There kind of hits a cap where the returns are diminishing for how much you'd spend on the tickets. But that being said, I enjoyed it. Fun music, everything else. So if you have the opportunity, take your kids to this whenever they're younger. But I do think if you see it once, you'll really enjoy it. But the older you get, like I realized that it was kind of scripted to make sure that they kept the game kind of close, and the jousting between the two guys in the middle. I knew what was going to happen by the end, but it was lots of fun. But I'm going to keep this rambling as short not as short as possible, but I'm going to try to keep it under 30 minutes. So let's move on to the next thing. This is going to sound super technical, nerdy, and everything else like that. So my apologies to folks who don't care a lot about this, but I want to point out to people who don't know, I'm putting out something called Theology Thursdays. And on these Theology Thursdays, I'm talking about a theological concept that and that people may not know or might have confusion about, or something that's really essential to Christianity. And I'm doing this with the hope that I can put it out in under 2 minutes, which I'll talk a little bit about that later. But this, I went over the Bebbington Quadrilateral. For those who don't know, the term evangelical has taken on an incredibly political identity, an incredible political understanding, and that's in the last 2 decade, where the modern evangelical, in my opinion, is more like the fundamentalist with culture wars and other stuff like that, and not as much tied to specific modes of living. And so eventually, not eventually, but essentially, an evangelical is someone whose life is centered on the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, telling other people about that, and who have their beliefs come from the Bible and not from other sources as the ultimate authority on what they think and believe. And so um, go look at the deep dives that David and I do on our sermons, but also check out the shorts with my Theology Thursdays. And in this also, please text, or it actually is better for the videos if you comment below what would be a theological concept that you'd like to see if I can explain it in under 2 minutes. 90 seconds is probably the longest that you can do on these things, because you have to put out um, a lot of musical content. They're only allowed to use 90 seconds of the song. So that's a really interesting dilemma. And my apologies, I just had an awkward silence going into this because I just rearranged my slides. I'm going to cover this now before I talk about the next couple things. It really bothers me how literacy in America is dropping, and we can tie it really strongly back to social media being a really big deal. Having smartphones where everyone watches stuff. I mean, the fact that I'm recording a podcast rather than writing a blog is a huge, huge indication of just how pervasive this is. If you were to do any investigation into Mr. Beast and how, yeah, Mr. Beast, yeah, because Mr. Beat is, yeah. For those who didn't know, there's a history teacher called Mr. Beat who does online content. Then there's the guy named Mr. Beast, who I think is the most subscribed YouTube personality out there. But with Mr. Beast, he re-edits and reposts all his videos with such intensity to make sure that there's zero quiet in the videos, and it's actually just like the cosmic baseball where you have to be entertained the whole time. I remember about the time that these studies on the screen goes back to 2012, 2014. Um, my boss at Youth for Christ, Ken Mills, he saw a study about the duration of camera angles and how it changed over the decades, and how 2012 is something like the average camera angle in a music video or shot in a music video lasted 3 seconds. If you're to watch so many different things now, 3 seconds is a long time. If you were to go to my last short that I made about the Bebington quadrilateral, the I make super small clips and I change the angle of the camera, and a lot of these comes from studies that show you can't have a straightforward non-interactive video. Like, kids won't watch it, people won't watch it. They're like, I know a coach who he a football coach, he would explain to kids what to do. They would just not listen to him. Then the moment he pulls up a screen with a video of that play, they're instantly engaged. Now there's an aspect of audio versus visual learning, but if you look at it, the literacy skills and everything else, it so as a whole, the United States has dropped for people who are middle literacy and high literacy. I'm really thankful that low literacy has grown in the last decade. And there's everything is multifactorial. I don't want us to be pointing our fingers at a lot of different things. But just think about how few books you have read in the last couple years. A lot of people say they despise reading. They don't enjoy reading. Different studies talk about essentially in the last 3 years, very few people have even read an entire book. There's apps that will condense books and reports and studies into being a singular item. I mean, like, if you were to put in your Google search anything, it pops up at the top, this AI summary of all the information. And those summaries they're helpful, and I don't want to say that there's no place for it, but you as a human being have a brain that needs to engage with thinking and content. In fact, so one of my athletes, hopefully you watch this, Kira, you are an artist, and I think about how much every time we do uh, AI art, it hurts someone like you who draws pictures and will do art on commission. The picture that you did for JD, the super coach, that was awesome. And super thankful that that was a gift that we were able to give him. But just like, we have given our thinking over to machines, and which is going to be the last thing that I talk about, because this is not anything that it's not as new as we think. And I'm all for using programs that might help. I mean, I have Accordance Bible software on my computer, which helps with grammar and language stuff in the original languages, as well as has an amazing library of resources. So I can have like 50 different Bible translations that I can compare in that application, rather than having to pick up a paper Bible, and look. But as you can see behind me, I have all these shelves, and I'm a firm advocate of picking up a book and reading it. So I want to quick mention a couple books that I am reading and have read. So I just finished the two books on the left. Well, no, I just finished the middle, which is the omnibus edition of the Relics of Eros, written by Jeremy Grinnell. And so it's three books plus a short in it. I would advise buying these individually. I think they're Dr. Grinnell. I want to support everything that you do, but the book 3 and the second half of it, the publishers messed up a little bit, and a couple of the pages are out of order. Outside of that, though, I really enjoyed the series. Something that I think we all need to do, especially people in my place who want to read all the technical books and everything else. We need to read narratives first off, but also reading something that is creative, that is fiction, that engages the mind and the brain and everything else like that, because we have to be able to process life, and we have to be able to actually engage with life using our imagination. We are creatures who are unique in this world that have the capacity for imagination and play and everything else like that. And you have to fight to maintain that as an adult. So the two books on the outside to show why I need to read creative stuff. Actually, so on the right, it's Scripture's use of Scripture in the Old Testament. Essentially, so one of my college teammates, Matthew Swale, super awesome guy. I think I mentioned this book once or twice, and I want to do an interview with him and post about it over this book. But this is kind of an outgrowth of his PhD dissertation, which sounds again super dusty to some people. But this book talks about how do we know that when one book in the Old Testament has a certain phrase in a verse, that if it's referencing or alluding to a previous passage or if it's directly quoting. And so this is a common question in all academic studies. So when you're reading early Christian writers from the 2nd through 8th century, the question is, are they quoting an Old Testament passage or not? So then, like, the way you figure out, is it a direct quote? Is it an allusion? And then whenever you are studying different books and literature, you try to figure out, like, what is a foundational way that something works forward? So if I were to say a long, long time ago or a long time ago in a galaxy far away, you would know I'm alluding to Star Wars if you've watched them. So an allusion to something is pretty powerful. And it creates inside jokes that are good ways to build camaraderie. Think about whenever you go to camp growing up, and there becomes those jokes that people say, or do you remember that time? And you can often tip the other person off by a certain word or phrase that tells the whole story without telling the whole story. So this book is about what are the instincts and what are the tools that we need to do to identify whether or not something is alluding to something else. I'm reading that, which is very different than reading The Relics of Eros, which is, I would say The Relics of Eros would be very, very similar to the Chronicles of Narnia, except Dr. Grinnell intentionally makes you feel the current moment of time. So it answers the question, like they allude to Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. There's a couple of other books that in movies that the teenagers in the book quote. But this is also where have you ever if depending on how nerdy you are or what corners of the internet you go to, there's this statement that how can we actually believe that Harry Potter is set in the 1990s if the Chicago Bulls aren't mentioned one time? I mean, the answer to that is that it's set in Great Britain and not in not in the United States. But anyhow, again, illusions are powerful. So I'm halfway through that book. I'm reading it, underlining and writing in the margins and everything else, so that way whenever I talk with him, because I want to interview him, because I want him to have as much publicity as he can on this book. I think it's a very important book for people who are wanting to be serious students of Scripture, for them to read. So then the last book that I want to talk about that I'm reading, I'm really close to being done. I started this on my trip to Europe. There's a couple of other books that I'm partway through that I didn't put up on this, but it's called A Rope and a Prayer, and it's about this New York Times journalist who he got kidnapped whenever he went to interview a Taliban leader, and his whole purpose of interviews and everything else was trying to make sure that he wrote an even-handed book addressing Afghanistan and the region, the Pushan region, where he wanted to actually interview people from the villages, the American different people, and he got kidnapped, and I think he was held hostage for 7 months. And in the book, I just got to the part where he escaped, and he was moved around in different places. Um, it's a fascinating book, especially for people who are like me, who remember Operation Iraqi Freedom, and in the current moment where we're dealing with conflict with Iran, people who remember the debacle for whenever the United States left Afghanistan and everything else like that. People who are wondering about the current diplomacy and legal status of the translators who worked for American soldiers or journalists who put their lives at risk, and then we had promised them citizenship or safe haven, and they weren't given to it. This book. It plays around with a lot of those. Well, I mean, not plays around. It helps you give a clearer picture of why certain things happen or not. Um, but here we go, the last slide, and the reason why I find it very, very, very important to talk about books. So on the right, you'll see Toy Story 5. And we watched this for my daughter's birthday. I enjoyed it. And I don't want to give spoilers for people who haven't seen it, but this movie really gives a warning to parents. I would say parents who don't have kids over the age of 7. Now, because Bonnie's older than 7, and it deals with how parenting with technology and what technology does or doesn't do, and that movie made me remember one of, I think, the most important, significant books written in the first half of the 1900s, and it's written by Jack Williamson, who was a weather forecaster during World War II, and he actually saw the development of the atomic bomb, and not like directly saw it, but like he asked the question, what will the end result of this technology be? And so he writes a book based upon the thesis, upon that hypothesis that, well, not hypothesis, upon the question, what would happen? And so not only that, I think it's important to note that he was born in 1908, and I think it's in 1915. His family took a covered wagon and went out west to Nevada, I think it was, or New Mexico. So went out west and while they were there, they ranched and they farmed and other stuff like that. So they dealt with, he dealt with watching the world develop from being people traveling in covered wagons to then seeing atomic bombs and World War II directly in his face. And in this book, written in the 1940s, it's a thriller horror. It's a novella, and in it, there's these humanoid robots that are given the charge. It's called the Prime Directive, and it is to serve and obey and guard men from harm. And to do that, they will keep humans from doing certain actions and activities that are considered harmful or riskful. Think about driving, how dangerous that would be. So if everything was automated driving, then no one would be at risk while driving. Think about activity and exercise and everything else like that. You're putting yourself at risk with that, elevated heart rate. You need to read the book to see all the different activities that weren't allowed. And if you fought against it, essentially these machines, to keep you from harm, they would lobotomize you. So that way you wouldn't fight or resist. And now I bring up a secondary thing where I believe we need to read dystopian literature to really engage our mind with, like, what is it that means to be human? What is the human agency that we desire? What does it mean to interact with other people? Because in this book, in this novella, the author was guessing something that happened 80 years later, 70 to 80 years later, where we handed everything that we had over to technology. And by doing that, we lose humanity. We lose the ability to actually engage with our mind and our heart. Relationships, you carry an inherent risk where when we know this person, what if they don't like us? What if they betray us? What if they use something we said against us? Anytime we try to learn a new task, like we could fail, and failure isn't the end. We every single um, pastor or public figure has someone who just doesn't like them for some reason, and we can't protect ourselves from all harm. And whenever we live a life that is only trying to avoid harm, we aren't living. And God gave us this life as a beautiful gift, and so I want everyone that I've coached just be reminded, especially as you're entering these college years, learn, grow. Don't be afraid to make friendships. Don't be afraid to try something new. Don't be. Please read a book. Don't just read excerpts. Don't just go to the AI, Grok, Google, everything else like that. Actually engage with thoughts and concepts. I believe in the world that we live in, people are doing that less and less. And um, it don't just read summaries. Don't just watch YouTube shorts. Like watch an actual video essay, and I think you'll receive a lot of benefit out of it. With that being said, I'm going to sign off, and I hope everyone has a great day.